If you've tried exposure therapy and it didn't help, don't worry, you're not alone. Hi, I'm Tim Box, mind coach and anxiety therapist. For more than a decade now, I've been working one-to-one with clients to help them overcome all sorts of anxiety-related issues. So when I work, I use a type of therapy that deals directly with the subconscious process, working to update and upgrade your automatic emotional responses. One of the many therapeutic approaches I don't employ is exposure therapy. But exposure therapy is often recommended as an effective treatment for anxiety, and it absolutely can be effective for many people. No shade here. This video isn't seeking to discredit a certain approach. It's simply an answer to a number of questions I've had over the years from people fearing they are beyond help, simply because exposure therapy didn't work for them. Did this mean they were unfixable, or that their anxiety was untreatable? Well, absolutely not. In this video, I'll explain why exposure therapy doesn't work for everyone and why its failure doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's more about how the approach itself might not align with your needs or situation. Exposure therapy is based on the principle that repeated exposure to the things you fear will reduce your anxiety over time. Exposure therapy is based on the principle that repeated exposure to the things you fear will reduce your anxiety over time. The goal is to help you become desensitized to the fear trigger. It's like retraining your brain to see that the situation or object isn't actually dangerous. This might involve gradually confronting fears in a controlled way, like touching a spider if you have arachnophobia, or standing in a crowded room if you have social anxiety. These gradual exposures can involve a step-by-step process drawn out over weeks or even months, with the ultimate goal being to educate your mind that there is nothing to fear and create different responses to the same stimuli. Well, the theory is sound, so why wouldn't it work? Well, actually, there are a few reasons. Firstly, this one. For many people, exposure therapy can feel like being thrown into the deep end before you've learned to swim. Yes, it's supposed to be gradual, but even the first steps might feel too much if your anxiety is severe. For many people dealing with high anxiety, even thinking about the things they're anxious about represents a highly unpleasant experience. In these instances, instead of reducing the fear, exposure therapy might actually heighten it, leaving them feeling more anxious than before. This isn't because they're doing it wrong or because they're unfixable, it's because the process might just be moving faster than their mind is ready for. Here's the paradox. If you approach exposure therapy with the mindset of, I need to conquer this fear to be okay, you're actually reinforcing the idea that your fear is dangerous. Your brain hears, this must be really important if we're putting so much effort into overcoming it. This can create a feedback loop where your fear grows rather than diminishes. We think about doing our daily exposures and the thought seems like a mountain to climb. Very soon we go to bed dreading the fact that we have another exposure to do tomorrow. Our therapist says we need to do them or we won't get better, and that simply amplifies the anxiety and fear surrounding the consequences of not doing them. Of all the clients I've seen that called no joy when it came to exposure therapy, by far the most common complaint was that they had grown to fear the process more than the anxiety itself. All their mind had learned is that taking the steps to try and overcome anxiety just causes more negative experiences. So anxiety isn't just about the thing you're afraid of, it's about why that thing feels threatening and why you feel unable to cope with it. Let's say you experience social anxiety and exposure therapy involves attending a party. Sure, you might get through it, but if you haven't addressed the deeper fear, like perhaps the belief that people will judge you or reject you, then your mind will continue to try and be heard about that concern and continue to cause anxiety. Now, I'm not the kind of therapist that insists you have to find the root cause of the issue, but remember, anxiety is a part of your mind flagging up something of importance. If we just barrel through that concern without listening to the reason for it, then yeah, we might manage to create a new response, but we also might not, simply because the part of our mind feeling anxious still doesn't feel understood. Without listening to and understanding why we feel anxious, exposure therapy can feel like putting a bandage on a wound that hasn't been cleaned. In my experience, therapists that advocate exposure therapy tend to talk about certain aspects of the process as an essential part of recovery. You must do your exposures. You must learn to tolerate discomfort. If then exposure therapy doesn't work for you, it's easy to internalize that as a personal failure. You might think, if this tried and trusted method didn't help, maybe nothing can. If I can't take the steps that I'm being told are essential parts of the process, then that must mean all hope is lost. Well, the good news I can share with you now is that that's just not true. Therapy isn't a one-size-fits-all process. There are no essential steps that all those seeking to recover have to go through. Just because one approach didn't resonate doesn't mean you can't find something that will. If a therapist tells you that some aspect of their process is objectively necessary for everyone, that simply means they have a slightly closed mind and have circled the wagons around their own method without exploring elsewhere. So if exposure therapy isn't working for you, what can you do? Well, off the top of my head, there are actually 3 things you can do. Firstly, focus on changing your relationship with anxiety. Rather than trying to beat or desensitize yourself to anxiety, try understanding it. Anxiety isn't your enemy, it's your mind's way of flagging something as important. Instead of resisting it, explore what it's trying to tell you. Listening to anxiety isn't a problem in itself. It only became a problem because you started listening with fear, and then as a result of that, probably tried to shut off from it completely. Secondly, work on self-compassion. Nothing fuels anxiety like self-criticism. When you're kind to yourself and stop judging your anxiety as a problem, you can greatly reduce its impact on you. If you stop beating yourself up, you stop being at war with your own mind. And wouldn't you rather be at peace with yourself than at war? The simple truth is that if everyone on the planet just started being unconditionally kind to themselves, then people like me would be out of a job. And finally, don't be put off trying other therapeutic approaches. There are many ways to address anxiety beyond exposure therapy. And I'm not going to list any here because there are just way too many and I don't want to appear like I'm endorsing one approach over another. I'm not even going to recommend the way I work because that's not the point of this video. The main takeaway here is that if one therapy wasn't right for you, that doesn't mean you are therapy proof. It just means you haven't found the right approach yet. The good news is that it's kind of like love. It might take a while to find the right person, but that's okay because you only need to find one. If you approach any therapy with an open mind and the intention of working with the therapist and fully engaging in the process, then you will find the one that's right for you. If exposure therapy didn't work for you, it's not because you're broken or beyond help. It's simply because that approach wasn't the right fit for you, and that's okay. Anxiety is a personal experience, and the journey to getting back in control of it is just as personal. What matters is finding the strategies that make sense for you. Don't give up. You're not therapy proof and you're not stuck with high anxiety forever. I'll often find myself telling clients that healing isn't about ticking boxes or following a prescribed path. It's about learning, growing, and finding what works for you. No matter where you are mentally and emotionally right now, you are capable of change and your anxiety does not define you. If a particular therapy didn't help, even one that some seem to be saying is the only answer, that's not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of finding the right approach for you. But what do you guys think? Have I been too hard on exposure therapy? Have you had success with it? What other approaches have you found that really helped? Let me know in the comments below. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you did, then please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more anxiety content that helps put you back in control. That's all for now. I'm Tim Box. Always remember, be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.